Chapter 1: The Haunted Highway. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the deserted highway, a chilling silence enveloped the surroundings. This road had a dark reputation, whispered about in hushed tones among the locals. They called it the Haunted Highway, a stretch of asphalt where the supernatural was said to roam freely. Jake, a seasoned truck driver, had heard the stories but dismissed them as mere folklore. That fateful night, he was on a long-haul trip, driving through the eerie landscape. His headlights pierced the darkness, revealing nothing but an endless road ahead. Suddenly, he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. He slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure was a woman, dressed in a white gown, her hair flowing in the wind. She looked ethereal, almost translucent. Jake got out of his truck, his instincts telling him to help. But as he approached, the woman vanished into thin air. Shaken, he got back into his truck and drove off, vowing never to return to the haunted highway. Chapter 2: The Phantom Hitchhiker. Sarah was a young woman with an adventurous spirit, always eager to explore new places. One summer evening, she decided to take a road trip through the countryside. As she drove down a lonely road, she saw a hitchhiker thumbing for a ride. He was a middle-aged man, looking tired and worn out. Feeling sympathetic, Sarah pulled over and offered him a ride. The hitchhiker thanked her and got in, sitting quietly in the passenger seat. They drove in silence for a while until Sarah tried to make conversation. She glanced over, but to her horror, the seat was empty. The hitchhiker had vanished without a trace. Panic set in as she realized she had picked up a phantom hitchhiker. She sped up, trying to shake off the fear that clung to her. When she reached the nearest town, she shared her story with the locals. They told her about the legend of the hitchhiker who had died on that road years ago and still roamed, seeking a ride to his final destination. Chapter 3: The Cursed Car. Mike was a car enthusiast who loved collecting vintage cars. He came across an old, dilapidated car at a yard sale and decided to buy it, hoping to restore it to its former glory. Little did he know, the car had a dark past. After weeks of hard work, Mike finally restored the car. On the night of its maiden drive, strange things began to happen. The radio played eerie tunes even when it was turned off, and the car's lights flickered. As he drove, he felt an inexplicable sense of dread, as if he wasn't alone. One night, he saw a shadowy figure in his rear-view mirror. He turned around, but the back seat was empty. The sightings became more frequent, and the car seemed to have a mind of its own, steering Mike into dangerous situations. Desperate, he researched the car's history and discovered that it had belonged to a notorious criminal who had died in a police chase. The car was cursed, and its previous owner was haunting it. Mike knew he had to get rid of the car, but the spirit wouldn't let him. It led him to a remote location where he lost control and crashed. As he lay there, injured, he saw the shadowy figure standing over him, whispering, "You're mine now." Chapter 4: The Ghostly Passenger. Tom was a taxi driver in a bustling city. One rainy night, he picked up a passenger from an old, abandoned building. The passenger, a young woman, got into the back seat, soaking wet. Tom offered her a towel and asked for her destination, but she remained silent. As he drove through the rain, Tom glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman looked pale and sad, her eyes filled with sorrow. He tried to engage her in conversation, but she only gave brief, cryptic responses. When they arrived at the address she had given, Tom turned around to find the back seat empty. The woman had vanished, leaving behind a wet spot on the seat. Bewildered, he knocked on the door of the house, and an elderly man answered. Tom explained what had happened, and the man's eyes filled with tears. He showed Tom a photograph of his daughter, who had died in a car accident years ago. She had been trying to get home that night but never made it. The elderly man believed his daughter's spirit was still trying to complete her journey home. Chapter 5: The Demon Truck. David was a long-haul truck driver, used to spending nights on the open road. One night, he found himself on a desolate stretch of highway, far from any town or rest stop. He noticed a pair of headlights in his rear-view mirror, gaining on him rapidly. The truck behind him was massive, with an aggressive, menacing appearance. It got dangerously close, its blinding headlights filling David's mirrors. He tried to speed up, but the demon truck matched his every move, tailgating him relentlessly. In a panic, David pulled over to let the truck pass, but it stopped right behind him. The air grew thick with an oppressive, malevolent energy. David felt an icy chill run down his spine as he watched in horror. The demon truck's engine roared, and its horn blared like a scream from the depths of hell. With no other option, David floored the accelerator and sped away. The demon truck followed him for miles, but eventually it disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. When David finally reached a truck stop, he shared his terrifying experience with other drivers who told him about the legend of the demon truck that haunted that highway, terrorizing those who dared to drive alone at night. Chapter 6: The Wailing Woman. Emma was on her way to a friend's house for a weekend getaway. The scenic route took her through winding mountain roads, surrounded by dense forests. As night fell, she felt a growing sense of unease. The road was empty, and the darkness seemed to close in around her. Suddenly, she heard a wailing sound, like a woman crying out in anguish. The sound grew louder and more desperate as she drove on. Emma tried to ignore it, but the wailing became unbearable. She pulled over, hoping to find the source of the noise and offer help. She stepped out of her car and followed the sound into the woods. The wailing led her to a clearing where she saw a woman in tattered clothing, her face obscured by her long, tangled hair. Emma called out, but the woman continued to wail, seemingly unaware of her presence. As Emma approached, the woman lifted her head, revealing hollow, empty eyes. Emma's blood ran cold as she realized she was staring at a ghost. The wailing woman let out a bone-chilling scream that echoed through the forest. Emma turned and ran back to her car, the ghost's cries following her. She drove off, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. When she reached her friend's house, she recounted her encounter. Her friend told her about the legend of the Wailing Woman, a spirit doomed to wander the woods, mourning her lost child who had died in a tragic accident on the same road.